Good morning. It is great to see all of you. It's great to hear our wonderful singing that we all have. Sorry about that. But it is a good day, and I too, like Alex said, could think of no other place to be on the Lord's Day than with His people. It is a wonderful thing to gather and assemble together as Christ's church and be here all together with you. And I'm glad you are here this morning. For just a moment, I want you to think about something in your life that has given you a new perspective, or something that has changed you. Something that made you think differently or act differently. Something that became very personal to you that maybe completely redirected your life. I want you to think about that for just a moment. There may be different things, and I'm sure there are different things that we all have that have done that for us. But when we look at the New Testament, we see people that had an experience like that. People that were completely changed because of something they had experienced. When we look at the apostles, and we look at the disciples, and we look at these people that followed Jesus, we can see and read about how they did a lot of great things for God. You know, they would preach sermons, and they went everywhere preaching. They would teach all the time. They were willing to endure and suffer through persecution, and even to the point that they would put their lives on the line for that. But when you read all of that, I think you see something behind them that really did change them. Something that ended up driving them, something that motivated them, something that compelled them to do all of those great things that we read about. And I'm going to suggest to you that what changed them was in fact the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The reality of the resurrection, the belief in the resurrection, that changed everything about them, and it affected everything that they did. It changed them. And this morning, I don't just want to look at the story, or I don't want to just look at the account of the resurrection. Not that we don't think that it's important. We don't necessarily celebrate it like other people do, but I just want us to look a little bit further into these thoughts about the resurrection. I want to look a little bit deeper into these thoughts and look at just a couple of things with you this morning, a couple of things that can happen when people are changed by the resurrection. Because if we can see how it affected them, I think it ought to affect us in the same way. So before we get to our first point, really, we need to understand. We need to understand that when we walk through the Gospels and we kind of read through the Gospel accounts, and we see these times when Jesus would allude to and sometimes tell his disciples that he was going to die. Well, most of them didn't quite understand what all of that meant. Most of them didn't understand what all of that meant. They didn't quite understand what Jesus was saying. And as Alex pointed out just a moment ago in John chapter 10, thank you, they didn't quite understand, these things when he would talk about how he's going to lay down his life, but he's going to have the authority to take it back up again. Or when he told them, like in Luke chapter 9, that the Son of Man he must suffer and be killed and be raised up on the third day. They didn't understand that. And even after they had finished with the Last Supper there in Matthew 26, he told them, listen, you all will fall away because of me this night. This very night, that's going to happen. And he said the shepherd is going to be struck down and the sheep are going to be scattered. And after I have been raised, I'm going to go ahead of you to Galilee. They didn't quite understand those things, and maybe didn't even fully believe that those things were going to happen. In fact, we know that because after Jesus had been crucified and he had been put into the tomb, you remember that there were only two individuals that actually showed up on the third day, on the morning of the third day. That was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. None of the rest of them came and were waiting at the tomb that day, that morning, like they were. Okay, and if you remember in Mark's gospel, it says that, after Mary had the encounter with Jesus, and she goes back, and it says that when she went back to report that the tomb was empty and that Jesus was alive, when they heard that he was alive, it says that they refused to believe it. In Mark chapter 16, verse 11. Even after, Jesus is found walking on the road with the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, they go back and they also report to the disciples, and they didn't believe them either. But finally, Jesus appears to them all, and in Mark chapter 16 and verse 14, it says that he reproached them for all of that. Jesus himself reproached them because of their unbelief and their hardness of heart. Jesus rebuked them for it, their unbelief. But after that, after all of that, and after, as Luke says, that Jesus appeared to them over a period of 40 days by many convincing proofs, they knew that Jesus had resurrected. The resurrection had completely changed them now. This was real for them now. All right, so let's look now at what happens when you're changed by the resurrection. Let's look over at Acts chapter 2 for just a moment. After the apostles had received the commission to go and preach to all the world, we now find Peter on the day of Pentecost preaching to a mass of people, and he's telling them all about how they, that be the Jews, how they killed Jesus. They nailed him to a cross, but it was impossible for death to hold him. He's not buried in a tomb like David is. His tomb's empty. And he's giving this great sermon, and he has this newfound boldness and courage to speak and preach to all of these people there that were at Pentecost, but what was it? I mean, why was he all of a sudden preaching to this massive crowd at Pentecost? What changed Peter? Well, the resurrection changed him. We know what changed it. The resurrection did. Now remember, they got rebuked by Jesus because they didn't believe that he had risen. But now Peter's saying, hey, listen, this Jesus, God raised up again, to which we are all witnesses. He said, I've seen him. I've seen him. It was personal to him now. And now he's telling everybody that Jesus is alive and has resurrected. And I mean, it was the main point of the sermon. Peter was changed by the resurrection. And listen, when you're changed, when you're changed by and because of the resurrection, you know what that does for a person? It compels you to speak. That compels you to speak. You see, for Peter, this was real now. Very real for him now, and all of them. He knew that Jesus had risen, and now he's going to go and preach all about that. If you have a proper understanding and realization of the resurrection, listen, that's not something that compels you just to stay silent. It's not something that compels you to sit still. It's a motivation that moves you. You're changed by it. I mean, it has an effect on you. It should. And I know we talk about this all the time. We talk about this all the time, how we need to be speaking about Jesus, telling people about Jesus. We hear so much, about evangelism, but really, I mean, if your life has been changed because of the resurrection, isn't that what should happen? I mean, really, isn't that what should happen? Now, sometimes I think we forget that speaking about Jesus, it does come in different ways. I think there are different ways to get there. I don't think that it's necessarily just about yelling to your neighbors from your rooftops about Jesus. I don't necessarily think it's all that. Okay, but if the resurrection means something to you, it then will move you to do certain things that might get you to the point to where you can talk and speak more, maybe more openly with somebody about Jesus. That because of your understanding of the resurrection and what that means, and because it's real for you, well, that might actually push you to develop a relationship with somebody. It might push you to talk with a coworker more, right? And get into some spiritual conversations with them if it's real to you. Right? That might push you to open up to a friend and talk with them more about Jesus and get their thoughts on Jesus and kind of start that conversation up with them. I've talked about this in the past. I've talked about this idea of a spiritual radar. I don't know if any of you remember that, but we talked about a spiritual radar. Well, if you're convicted by the resurrection, you've probably got your spiritual radar turned on all the time now. You're going to be looking for opportunities where you can have some sort of a Christian influence on someone, or maybe speak to somebody about the Bible, or maybe you get an opportunity where you can answer somebody's question. You're looking for all of those instances. You're looking for that stuff. You're keeping an eye out for it. You're looking for opportunities and windows to speak and maybe share some sort of wisdom from the Bible to people. That's how you live when the resurrection means something to you. When it has changed you, it compels you to speak, just like it compelled Peter to preach. Now, that's not the only example. That's not the only example that we get with Peter. When we move a little bit further into the narrative of Acts, and we find in chapter 3 that he and John, they come to the temple and they come to the gate called Beautiful, and there's a lame man sitting there. And they heal this lame man in front of the gate there. Well, that drew quite the crowd. That drew in quite the crowd, and Peter takes advantage of that, and he starts preaching again. And a lot of that message is a lot of the same thing that he preached back in chapter 2, but they put to death the the author of life, whom God raised from the dead, a fact to which we are witnesses. He's preaching about that again. Okay, that rolls right into chapter 4. And now, because of all of that preaching and the commotion that has ensued, here come now the priests, and here come the captain of the temple guard, and here come the Sadducees. Drew their attention. And look what it says in chapter 4. What happened with them? It says that they were greatly agitated. Well, why? Because they were teaching the people and proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection of the dead. Agitated them, made them angry. And so they put them in jail. They put them in jail. Now you roll into the next day, so they're just kind of held there for the night. You get to the next day, and they get placed, they come and they grab Peter and John, and they place them in the midst of and in front of basically all the rulers and of the religious leaders of Jerusalem and everywhere. And it says now they're in front of the rulers, the elders, and the scribes. You've got Annas, the high priest there, Caiaphas, who was also in the trial of Jesus, him. You've got also these two other individuals, John and Alexander, and it says all who were of high priestly descent, they're in front of all of those people. Peter and John, a couple of fishermen from Nazareth or Galilee, and they're in front of them. Well, they ask them the question. They ask them in verse 7. They say, "By what power? Or in what name have you done this? How have you healed this man?" They want to know about whose authority have you done this? Who gave you permission? Well, it says that Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, here's what he said. He says, "Rulers and elders of the people, if we're being examined today for a good deed done to a sick man, as to how this man has been saved from his sickness, let it be known to all of you and to all the people of Israel that by the name of Jesus Christ the Nazarene, whom you crucified, whom God raised from the dead, by this name, this man stands here before you in good health. He is the stone which was rejected by you, the builders, but which became the chief cornerstone. And there is," he tells them, he says, "there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name given under heaven that has been given among men by which we must be saved." That's what he told these guys. That's what they told them. And look what it says in verse 13. The very next verse, it says, "Now, as they observed the confidence of Peter and John, and they comprehended that they were uneducated and just ordinary men, they were marveling. And they began to recognize them as having been with Jesus." You know what? When you are compelled, or when the resurrection has changed you, you know what? It doesn't just compel you to speak. When you are changed by the resurrection, it compels you to be bold. It compels you to be bold in your speech. And that's actually exactly what that word there, confidence, means. It means boldness, plainness, frankness, courage. That's what they had. But look what gave them that. Look at what was behind the boldness that they had. It was what they knew. It was what they believed and were convicted about the resurrection. It was the resurrection. Peter, he just keeps throwing it in there now every chance he gets when he gets a chance to speak. God raised him from the dead. God raised him from the dead. The rulers, they were sick and tired of hearing it. And so then what happened? Well, the rulers all get together now after he just said that to them, and they all get together, and basically they're like, what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with these people now? I mean, everybody saw that this miracle took place. They all saw the miracle that was performed. I mean, there is no denying that. And so, unless we want this to spread any further, well, here's what we should do. Let's just warn them. Let's give them a warning. That's what we should do. Let's warn them not to speak any longer to any man in this name. Couldn't even bring themselves to say the name Jesus, could they? Let's warn them not to even speak of this name anymore. And so they bring Peter and John back in there in front of them all. And that's exactly what they said. They said, look, don't speak or teach anymore at all in the name of Jesus. Don't do that anymore. We don't want this going on anymore. But what did they reply with? That's when you get this kind of iconic statement from Peter and John. But Peter and John answered and said, listen, whether it's right in the sight of you or the sight of God to hear you or give heed to you rather than God, you be the judge. For we cannot stop speaking about what we have seen and heard. Well, what had they seen and heard? The resurrection. They were so convinced and convicted about the resurrection of Jesus that they are willing to stand directly in front of the dudes of Jerusalem, the people that had laid hands on them and put them in jail, the people that killed Jesus, and say, sorry, we can't listen to your orders about that. I mean, I'm just sorry, I can't do it. We're going to keep speaking about Jesus. I don't care what you say on that. Man, what an example of courage coupled with conviction. That's the kind of change that the resurrection can produce in a person. It can change a person so much that it compels them to be bold like that. Do you have that kind of boldness? Do you have that kind of confidence about you? Has the resurrection done that for you? To where you're willing to speak for Jesus, speak up for Jesus or something, God related, no matter who you might be in front of. Do you have that? To where it wouldn't matter if there were threats coming upon you, that you would still be bold enough to speak? Or even if you just think about it in other ways. Are you bold enough to bring Jesus into the conversation when you're talking to your friend about life? Are you bold enough to bring Jesus into the conversation? Are you bold enough to stand up for the Bible? Are you bold enough to stand up for truth? I mean, when somebody may mention something that's just flat out wrong about the Bible, I mean, and you hear it right there. We've got a friend of ours, and she is a nurse, and she called us one night because she was really convicted about what happened at her work one night. I think she was on break, and sometimes the nurses, they kind of just hang out, they're talking and so forth. Well, some of them, I guess, and she's a member of the church, and some of them got to talking, and they were talking about some things, biblically speaking, and well, she just kind of overheard the conversation, and what they were saying was not right. Wasn't right at all. But she knew enough that what they were saying wasn't right. And she said, I couldn't help myself. I had to speak up. I had to speak up, and I forget exactly what it was, but she said, I was scared to death, but I had to do it. And then she was kind of talking with us, hey, where can I go? What can I talk to them about? What things can I bring up in conversation with them? And, we helped her out and stuff like that. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. Are you that bold to stand up for the truth? I mean, that's a real life situation. That's a real life scenario. And I'm sure plenty of you have those situations in your life. Are you bold enough to stand up and speak and say something when it's necessary? Are you bold enough to risk the relationship and talk to somebody that you love about their need for Jesus and maybe the path that they are currently walking on? That's a hard conversation to have. Are you bold enough to speak when it matters, even if it is going to cost you something? I think there have been times in my life, maybe there has been times in yours, where I wish that I would have been this bold. Times where I should have just said something, but I didn't. I didn't speak up. I didn't say what should have been said, and I'm disappointed in that. I'm disappointed in myself for those times. Because there's no reason why I shouldn't have, if I believe all this stuff about Jesus and the resurrection and all this stuff to be true. There's no reason why I shouldn't have. And if I truly have been changed like I say that I have, because of the resurrection, there's no reason to hold back what I've been convinced of. Yet sometimes we do. And we fail. We fail to speak, and we fail to be bold. Sometimes I just think we're scared. When you really get down to it, I think we're just scared sometimes. But you know what? If you keep reading a little bit, right there in chapter 4, they released Peter and John. Okay, they threatened them, but they released them. They're going to go back into custody here later, but for this time, they released them. You know what happened whenever they were out of there? Peter and John, they go back to the brethren. I love this. They go back to the brethren and they report everything that had happened to them. They're excited. They want to go back and they want to share with the rest of the Christians, the rest of the church, what happened to them. And you know what it says? It says when they did that, all of them, they immediately lifted up prayers to God because of that. And one of the things, just catch this, one of the things that they prayed for, though, was that He would grant them to speak His word with all confidence. To speak His word with all confidence. Sometimes we may be disappointed in ourselves. And we feel like failures because we didn't speak when we should have. And we weren't bold like this. But I think we see a solution for that. We see the solution for when we don't have the boldness that we want. And that solution is prayer. The solution is prayer. Prayer to God and asking Him to give us the confidence so that we would be able to speak with boldness at the right times. When we think about the things that truly change our life and change our entire outlook on life, and the things that drive us to live Christian lives, there is a natural cause and effect relationship that should be there. The cause is the resurrection. And that should have an effect on your life just as it did in their life. It changed them in such a way that they weren't afraid to speak. And they weren't afraid to be bold. That's what the resurrection did for them. It changed them. But the question is, has the resurrection changed you? Has the resurrection changed you? Has it had an effect on you? Has it shaped you? Has it transformed you? Has it caused you to live differently? Has it prompted you to speak? Has it given you the confidence to be bold? Is it something that you cling to when you go through suffering or persecution, or and is it something that you're able to say, you know what, that's why I'm going through this. That's why, because I put all of my eggs in the basket of Jesus, and it's His resurrection that compels me to go through this and live according to a different standard. Has it changed you at all? Is it your reason for living? Or is it just a truth that you know about, but it hasn't really changed you? Well, if it has, I hope you keep living like it has. And I hope you stick with it. And I hope you keep pressing on and living the Christian life. But if it hasn't, I'm going to tell you right now where it can start to become real for you. Where it can start. And it's when His resurrection becomes your resurrection. Did you know that the Bible says that when you are baptized into Christ, like in water and through actual water, you know that symbolically, that baptizes you, that puts you into His death? When you are literally lowered down into the water, you're burying yourself like He was physically buried. But you're burying your old self. Your sinful self. You're burying that person in the water. And then just like He was actually raised and resurrected, when you are raised up out of the water, you are symbolically doing the very same thing that happened to Jesus. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. That right there is what then unites you to Jesus. That's what unites you to Jesus. That's Romans 6 chapter 5 or 6 verse 5. You are then united with Him through that process. You are united with Him in the likeness of His resurrection, or in the likeness of His death, and then so also you will be in the likeness of His resurrection. Let me get that straight. His resurrection then becomes your resurrection. That's where that all really starts for you, for anybody. That's where it starts. We could say it. In the waters of baptism, that's where it starts. And if you haven't stepped into that, it's going to be hard for you, or for it, the resurrection, to truly be real for you, because you're not united with Him. If you haven't been baptized into Him, you're not united with Him. But I'm going to tell you what, when you are, when you truly do step into that, it changes everything. It changes everything about you. The way that you think, the way that you live, how you serve, it completely changes your life. Ask many people in here the effect that it has had on their life. Listen, if you want your life to be changed, if you want to be united with Jesus, if you want your life to be changed by and because of the resurrection, if you want His resurrection to be your resurrection, there's no better time to do it. And if that's what you need and that's what you want, you can do it today during this time that we sing. Let's stand and sing.